And the lack of soil erosion is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable with the cover crops and stubble and the organic matter in the earth. It's like if you ever experienced taking a fence row out and removing a fence and then farming that fence row with the field. That ground in that fence row is just like garden material. And that's because it was left undisturbed and it was growing roots year after year after year after year. And I think eventually we can get this ground back to prairie type. You know what I mean? Back to like the prairie again. Well, Andy got married, and that's when my wife and I moved to Freeport. And early on, her and I'd come out a lot to work. But then here in the last, now we got Bob and Steve there, Andy's sons. Thank God for that. And they got ambition, and they got enthusiasm. And they just like building this thing.
What am I? The seventh generation?
No, I think we are.
Yeah, you guys are the seventh. I'm the sixth generation on our farm, not this piece of ground right here, but the home farm in this in Joe Davis County. 1853 is the first deed. Actually, it wasn't even a deed; it was just a bill of sale back in 1853, and I'm hoping that these guys become the seventh, and I'm hoping we can have an eighth, and I'm hoping we can keep going from there. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this soil health. We also, my brother, his wife, my wife, of course. Just happens that the three of us are here today, but there's an extended group that is involved in the farm. So this field is beans last year with a cover planted of rye, planted into corn, and then we tried to interseed into it. We waited. One of the reasons we waited, well, there's several reasons. We waited till the corn was waist high. I wanted to go at least 5 weeks before and let the corvus kind of run its course before we put seed on the ground. And that was one of the reasons why we waited. And the other reason that thing wasn't ready.
So like Bob and I were talking earlier, we were thinking about why we had seen videos and stuff about guys interseeding and having success with it, and for the past couple of years the weather in the fall hasn't been very good for getting the drill out there and getting good cover crops established, which is at the end of the day our main goal. And so you see, like I said, videos on interseeding and the success that they've had, like we've had behind us, and that was just kind of our way to make our the ability for us to have cover crops
It broadens our window a little bit.
Yeah.
It gives us a bigger window.
Exactly.
To get more acres.
Yeah, exactly. And have more success with that. Not let Mother Nature dictate, whether we have that success or not.
We've been asked to talk about the interseeder. And I'll start the story and you guys finish it. The story goes, my brother went to an auction up in Browntown and called me and he said, there's a detasseler sitting here that looks like it's from the 60s. And I said, if it brings less than $1,000, just go ahead and buy it. And if it runs. And so he called me back and he said, I paid $1,030. And I said, pretty cool. $1,030 for a base machine. Then we had to figure out what we were going to do with it. And so we had ideas. We were going to put a spinner on it. We were going to do some different things. And I kind of think we all were sitting around and we kind of came up with an idea of putting insecticide boxes on it. And then these guys actually took the idea and made it into a working model. That was nothing, because all I did was just come up with an idea and they made it work.
And somehow our neighbor Rob Nading heard, and he had the scrap planter that had insecticide boxes that weren't being used, and that's who supplied the insecticide boxes. Who somehow he found out about it and said, "Here, I've got what you can use," and so that. And then we went up to Andrews Ag in Belmont, Wisconsin, and that's where we got all of, we needed some way to drive everything, so we got the shafts and the bearings to run it, and the pieces for the folding, to fold the arms up so it'd drive. And then got a transmission out of a 7200 John Deere Horn planter, and Steve rigged that up, to because we knew what it originally, when we wanted to broadcast, our issue was our metering would be so off because it's so slow and it's so weak that actually anybody who's watched a video of me interseeding saw just how slow and pathetic the thing is. Our metering would be horrible, but so once it meters off the tire, that solved that problem, and Steve rigged that transmission up. And we can also change our rate a little bit.
So the machine is repurposed. So we are officially green and care about our environment. So we're repurposing old equipment that was not being used or out of date or scrapped, and came up with something that we can actually use. Maybe it's not fun to use. In fact, yeah, he can drive it. I'm not driving it. I drove it a little bit one morning, but other than that, it's not fun to drive.
Coming up the waterways on the other side of
that was
incredible. I had to shift it in low gear, and it was going half a mile an hour.
Going from 3 miles an hour to half a mile.
Oh yeah, and that Wisconsin motor just blowing on you. Good time.
So I guess, yeah, this is the interseeder with the detasseler frame and high boy, I guess you call it, with the insecticide boxes mounted onto it. And then Bob did all that, put the shafts and the brackets and everything on it, and then I mounted the transmission on it and wired that, so you got an electric clutch up to there so you can turn it on and off. And yeah, these arms come down, drop the chains, and drops the seed on the ground, kind of scratches the ground and everything. And
yeah, it gets a little soil to seed contact. The arms were actually, I cut them off with a plasma cutter. They were part of the baskets that the people would stand in to do the detasseling. This is a manual detasseler where people would stand in the baskets. And the chains are from an old tire chains for a tractor that were worn out. And so that's kind of how we get some soil to seed contact. And and the down tubes are just garden hose with, this was the old insecticide distributors from these boxes, the planter that was off of. And then like Steve was saying, he mounted this transmission that drives right off the tire here. If we had it to do over again, the insecticide hoppers don't really meter maybe quite as well as we expected. They aren't, it isn't like having a small seed meter or something like that off of a grain drill. It's kind of, the contact is more of a sweeping motion than an actual dumping. So our transmission doesn't change the rate quite as much as we'd like to. But you know, it was an experiment, and we're hopefully we'll improve on it still further along.
The hard part about getting it done wasn't mounting the things. It was mounting the transmission, getting the drive back to the boxes, and getting everything lined up so that it was straight.
Yeah.
That was the hard part.
I didn't think mounting shafts was that bad, but yeah, getting the
Figuring out how to make the transmission spin.
right.
That was they're just lucky that there was an old lawnmower tire laying around.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have had it. I mean, really, we just picked scrap up. The chain is new. That's the only part that's new.
I don't think we did anything else to it.
We bought it because it had good tires on it. If it hadn't had good tires on it, we'd let it go. But you got good tires on it. By God, that you can make it work then. And right now, Bob is running the seeder, and we're out here standing in a field that we're trying to do an interseeding on. It's a farm that we just bought this spring, and I'm not real familiar with the soil and the way that the farm lies, but I thought this might be an opportunity to try and improve some of the soil that's on this farm. Right here where we're standing is horribly eroded from years of tillage, so we're going to try and make an attempt at regaining some of the productivity of these soils. As you can see, we're in 30-60 skip, and we're only planting into the 60-inch space. We're not planting anything into the 30-inch space. In the rows that are planted at 44,000, so that we come up with 29,000 population over the entire field. That's a little short of what I normally would like, but that's what we can accomplish. The field, from what I can see and what I've noticed this spring, is that its problem is more broadleaf weeds, winter annuals, than it was grasses. So I put down a residual herbicide for broadleaf weeds, and in that instance, I'm not trying to establish a broadleaf cover crop here. So the only thing that we are seeding right now is annual ryegrass, and the attempt is going to try and get root system into the soil that will be there for next spring, help with erosion control. That's the main thing. That's what I'm looking for on this farm, is to try and get the erosion control under control. Beth was asking me about this corner of the field and why I said that it was eroded, and she said, "How can you tell?" And just from the surface, you can tell when you pick up dirt. There's just no little or no organic matter in it. It is soil. It is rock. It is just pulverized rock. It has no life in it anymore. You can tell by the corn that's here that it just doesn't have organic matter to release nutrients to the corn. And that's my whole attempt here, is to try and improve this soil. Our plan here probably is to just do a corn and bean rotation on this farm. You never can tell. Maybe we put it in hay someday, but for in the short term it'll be a corn and bean rotation. So hopefully we'll get this annual ryegrass established, and it'll make it through the winter, hopefully. And next spring we'll plant soybeans into it. We'll till soybeans into it. And then in the fall, after the soybeans are harvested, we'll go with cereal rye. And then the cereal rye, the next year, we'll plant corn into the cereal rye, probably in the same manner, and then interseed this once again. And then we'll do that for a few years and see if what kind of results we can get as far as just establishing cover crops on this farm. We've established them on all the other land that we've got, and been running cover crops for decades. So we're just going on a little bit of an accelerated program here. The field, I don't know if you noticed, but I allowed the weeds to grow pretty good. I allowed the broadleaves to survive in the spring and didn't terminate them until a week ago. And in that case, I don't know how wise it is, but I allowed the weeds to be our cover crop for the spring. The green living material on the field, I allowed that to be the weeds to serve that purpose. And the winter annuals are going to be here regardless. You're just not going to get rid of the winter annuals. That's always going to be a no-till. So in that case, why not use them? Why not use the shepherd's purse and the mouse-eared chickweed and some of the other winter annuals that are growing in these fields? Why not use them as a cover crop, as a green living plant? And we're giving it a shot this year. Kind of a tough year. I don't know. I said it before. I kind of think this is the rattiest corn we've had since I started farming, as far as uneven and varying heights of corn. It's all there. The plant population is there. It's just so much variation in the field. We'll see if it straightens out. Like we always said, it's what happens in the end. Doesn't matter how fresh the paint is. It only matters how fast the car will go. Here we are, July 17th. Just got back from Greg Thorne's field day. Excellent field day. We're here in the field that we did the interseeding on a 30-60 row split, and we were just going to dig a little bit and look at the roots. One thing I got to say is on some of the video, I use the phrase I. That doesn't mean I, it means we, and my brother included. Because sometimes I use the word I, and that only means because maybe I did a pass with the sprayer. Well, I sprayed it. No, we sprayed it, we. Okay, so I get that one out of the way. I watched the video earlier and it bothered me that I said I too much, because it's not I, it's we. And pretty soon it's them. We look down through the line. One thing I wanted to point out is these rows are facing north and south, and the interseeding in between is fairly consistent across the rows. But on the rows that go east and west, if we look here, on the rows that go east and west, the seeding tends to be better on the south side of the 60-inch split. And the only thing that I can think of is that when the sun is out, the sun shines on the north side of this 60-inch split. So it's possible that it's forcing the annual ryegrass, which is a cool season grass, to go into dormancy because of the increased heat on that side of the rows. I just wanted to dig here a little bit just to see what kind of root mass we can come up with. So we've got roughly 4-inch average, maybe 3 to 4 inch average growth on top, and the roots, they're penetrating there a good 3 inches, and some of them maybe a little farther. The fine roots are going a little deeper. So hopefully by fall we can get quite a bit more root mass growing, and then through the winter we can get quite a bit more. This farm, prior to us purchasing it, had been in no-till, but not cover crops. And so in that case, the soil structure should be fairly sound. And what we're trying to do with the cover crops is just help with soil erosion and improve soil health. I'm kind of disappointed right now. I've yet to find a worm.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
Because if we're at home and I dug up a thing like this, there's worms like crazy. So I'm kind of disappointed that I'm not seeing any worms here. And it might take time. It might take time to get living organisms in this soil. Yeah, that's what we're going for. I like that. That's nice. See how it fractures? Just soft. As far as the soil tests, I pulled a soil test from a 6-inch, a 0 to 6-inch depth. I went out into the field and pulled a few different samples, and to try and come up with a representative sample of the field. And I didn't worry myself about walking in real far. I just did a spot, and and we sent the soil tests away. The soil analysis, as far as the fertility of the soil, I would say honestly is pretty good. I was very pleased with the P and K levels, and that the pH was in sound order. We have a good building block for our to try and do something with that farm as far as getting cover crops established. I like to see a K level high because rye really likes potassium. So I like to see a good high K level. And as far as the micronutrients, I don't think anything was too far out of balance. Maybe a little sulfur wouldn't hurt anything. But other than that, I think we were okay. You can go to the next slide. Just a close-up of the previous slide so that you can see some of the numbers. The 6.0 on the pH isn't outstanding. I'm not going to grow alfalfa there, but it's still acceptable for corn and bean rotation. You can go on to the next. This is just trace elements. Anybody see anything that's out of the ordinary there?
Not really out of the ordinary, but this might be the one time where university recommendations are going to have you add a little bit of micros compared to what the private industry is saying. I pulled up the recommendations from University of Illinois. Everything looks really good though. Your P levels are high. Your Ks are probably at the maintenance level, where you could be applying every year for your potassium, but phosphorus you could probably even lay off for a year or two, with it being 85 pounds per acre. And then the micronutrients, I guess, is just small amounts, but like you said, Andy, it's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, in this case, this farm will not get probably any livestock manure, so I'll have to supplement the micronutrients with purchased inputs. Or maybe the cover crops will help pull some of that from the soil a little deeper and feed the crop a little bit. We can go on to the next slide. This was the soil health score. I'm not real familiar with, I believe this was this a Haney test? I think it is. But anyway, the fertility levels were adequate to good, and I was pleased with the way those numbers looked. But then the soil health score and the respiration were not so great. Phil, did you have anything to add to this?
Well, so if we're looking at what the soil health score is looking at, there's really 5 characteristics. There's respiration, carbon to nitrogen ratio, soluble carbons, organic nitrogen, and then your physical characteristics like bulk density and infiltration, which I didn't see the results for, which was interesting. But with respiration is has a heavy weight in the Haney test. So, you know, with your fertility looking as well as it is, your carbon to nitrogen ratio is right in range. It's a respiration factor, it looks like, that's really scaling the soil health score down. Now, the Haney test is kind of more useful as an indicator of results over time, so you can use it comparably to see if you are increasing respiration, are increasing your soil health score, to see if the practices that you're doing are improving overall soil quality. But it's hard to take a snapshot from a Haney test and say this is the condition of the field, in my opinion. So respiration seems like it's a heavy one. So that's typically manipulated by the microbial community. So adding cover crops and keeping those microbial communities alive can help stir the soil up. but then bulk density and infiltration. So my first thought was perhaps some type of compaction issue, or even in no-till systems, after year of going over with those equipment, you can get some subsurface compaction, which can limit respiration. So that's kind of where my thought process was going. But overall, it seems like the field's in pretty good shape. So that's kind of why I was asking Andy about if this was tilled for years, or if this is the first year kind of going into a no-till system.
No, it had been under no-till for a long time. I'm honestly guessing that Rob had owned that for 15 years.
Yeah.
And so it had been under no-till for at least a decade.
But yeah, Andy, I would be interested in seeing like what the physical characteristics would show from soil texture, compaction, and then bulk density, infiltration. Those would have significant impacts on soil respiration, but those are things that can be remediated with cover crops going deep down and kind of alleviating that, bringing air into the subsoil.
Yeah. Something that I've thought about this year, our winter last year was not typical. We didn't have the cold weather to get a lot of the freeze and thaw that we need to with no-till. The freeze and thaw is a nice thing to have to help alleviate some compaction. And we didn't get that very much last year. We kind of had a lot of snow, then we froze up, and then we didn't have that freeze and thaw thing going very much. So that might be something that's affecting this year's crop or soil conditions also.
It's interesting because I kind of give you an explanation, but it's not necessarily tailored to your own system. So these are more general statements about, what these scores are. Still, I'm not noticing anything about any physical characteristics, but yeah, you still have to kind of do a little investigating on your own to see what those scores are telling you. But I think, Andy, you have a really unique opportunity here to see how these practices are going to shape the soil over time. Starting with the first year.
That's what Beth and we were talking about, getting this soil sample, and it gives us that first year baseline and see if we can improve things as we go.